start on our second panel. And again, I want to thank you all for great participation, on our vineyard panel, and look forward to more of the same now that we're moving from the vineyard to the winery. I want to introduce the panelists. And at the end of the panel, all the way to my right, your left, we have Chris Van den Burg, and that's Mike's brother, and Mike is in the vineyard, Chris is in the winery, and they started working in the vineyard since 1986, and Chris studied at UC Santa Cruz, but besides his studies in physics, he decided he wanted to meet some people in the wine business, and he met, I'd say, some pretty significant role models with Ridge Vineyards, Paul Draper, and the group, David Bruce, Randall Graham, and he thought that physics was wonderful, but he went to Europe, and while he was studying for his postgraduate degree, stayed between Burgundy and Bordeaux to learn more about wine, and we thank him for all that. Next to Chris is a personal favorite of mine, Judd Finkelstein, because let's just say I knew Judd before a lot of you did. And Judd's family and I and my wife go back a very long time. Judd's dad, Art Finkelstein, who originally founded with his brother, Alvin Steen, Whitehall Lane, when they sold that, he founded Judd's Hill. And Art and I met at a California Cabernet Society tasting, and as soon as we saw each other, we realized we'd been fraternity brothers back at USC. And that takes away a little more from the Texas A&M. But Art and I were fraternity brothers, and our friendship goes back. Unfortunately, Art passed away a few years ago, but our friendship went back into the 1960s. And Judd and his wife Holly have grown into the business along with Judd's mom, Bunny Finkelstein, and it's just a real beautiful picture of a family business here in the Napa Valley, and more so in America. And I'm very proud that you're here, Judd. Thank you.
I'm thrilled. Thank you.
Now I'm going to go back to those. Okay. Lily Oliver Berlin, who is here representing El Molino, and a personal story going back on El Molino as well. I met Reg and Marie Oliver many years ago through the introduction of John and Diane Livingston, and I did not know the wines of El Molino at the time, but Reg was kind enough to take me downstairs and with a group of friends and introduced me to the wines of El Molino. And Lily has taken on the generational change, and she has some very interesting and personal thoughts to share with you. So who doesn't know Dunn Cellars, right? Mike's dad, Randy Dunn, is definitely an iconic personality in the Valley for many years and in many ways. The wines of Dunn Cellars are, let's just say they're iconic in the California Cabernet community. And they moved to the Valley in 1978, and I still have some of the old vintages in my cellar. Mike worked with Dunn Vineyards after graduating from UC Santa Barbara. He worked in the vineyards as a cellar rat and everything else. Now he's formed his own brand, and Mike is here to talk about the generational change within Dunn family and on into his new brand and new venture. So why don't I turn it over to Mike to start, and let's get a little talk about you and what you're about to do.
Thank you. Yes, we moved here in '78 on a vineyard in Hamilton, and I was requested to work on a daily basis. And so I actually went off to college thinking I would never come back to the winery, not because I had to work, but just because I didn't really want to work with my parents. Probably all can understand. It's a very, very difficult process for most people, and probably well worth it if you can come to mutual agreements. But I came back. When I graduated from college, I studied surfing and bike racing, and I started a bike shop with my best buddy, and he lasted for about 3 years. I unfortunately kept it for about 13 and a half years. I call that my MBA. It cost more than an MBA, but I learned a lot of valuable lessons. Can you hear me? And unfortunately, we had a tragedy in our family. My sister passed away from meningitis. She came home from Chico with a cold and died promptly 2 days later. So I actually asked my dad if I could start working at the winery because I was tired of selling the bicycle tubes for $5, and he said, you know, you don't want to work for me. You want to be your boss. And how right he is. It was. Anyway, so in '99 I started back at the winery part-time. I had my bike shop at the same time. And I got loaned out to Chateau Montelena for their harvest. So I worked there for a month and then did Dunn's harvest. Well, Chateau Montelena was 6 of us, we did 900 tons. Dunn was 6 of us, 90 tons. A lot harder work too. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. So anyway, I was on the road to question my dad at every turn from then on. And it's one of those situations where we were allocated, we were a coal winery. How could I possibly improve upon that? And my dad has forgotten more about winemaking than I can really know. But my role has been really to make the winery efficient. We've had to play by the rules as most wineries do now, because there's how many wineries in '79 versus virtual wineries we have today? There's a lot of people out there. Dunn was allocated and forgotten about a bit, except for our core customers. And those people have actually aged. We've been making wine for 33 years. So if you bought a case every year and you don't drink a bottle a day. So yeah, I have a lot to say about family interpersonal relationships, maybe not appropriate for this time, but and actually it was really fascinating listening to the panelists before. Julie mentioned the succession plan for wineries. We had definitely done that from way back when. It takes a lot of foresight and money to actually successfully avoid the taxes that you do get punished for. We're not like France where the eldest son inherits, I don't know if they still do that anymore. So Dunn, there's so many good questions in the last panel, but Dunn has been accused of having a stylistic change because of my involvement. And I just wanted to clarify and touch upon a bit of what we have maybe changed, but really, in reality, we make wines the same exact way, same yeast, same fermentation process, same barrels. I've simply come in and cleaned up the cellar. And you're a winemaker, you probably understand what I mean, but we have a really moldy old cake, and the only thing maybe we have done differently is increase the percentage of new wood in our wines because we can afford to. We did things like Eva was mentioning. We bought everything cash. We didn't have a loan. So slowly now we've been able to actually buy a forklift with a big number. And a lot of these things people take for granted, we did things the old-fashioned. So and we still do. It's just ludicrous. Now I'm 46 years old. I don't want to pitchfork 90 tons into the pressure anymore, and 90 tons out of the tank. So we have 10 numbers. How much time do I have? So you're done. Okay. Paraphrase, you're done. It's funny when Diana. When Diana
if he'd like to participate on the panel, Mike answered to her, who's better qualified? So, you did a good job.
Meeting in the succession.
Yes, okay. And you're gonna meet Mike's wife, Kara, in the final panel, and she will talk about their project, Retro Sellers. So we'll get to that. Julie, please.
Lily.
I'm sorry. Julie was on the last one.
It was great, and I enjoyed her comments. And I want to thank everyone for being here and supporting the wine library. It's a wonderful organization, and thank you for having a seminar. Almino was one of the first wineries in Napa Valley. It was founded in 1871 and operated until Prohibition and closed down, and then my great aunt and uncle purchased the old Ghost Winery in about 1940, and they thought it would make a wonderful place to live, and so they turned the old winery into a residence, and spent 40 years enjoying the property. My great aunt was active in the wine library. She was one of the first presidents of the wine library. Her name was Nancy Hayden. And she also worked for Louis Martini Winery, doing sales and marketing, but never desired to produce wine at Almino, even though they lived there. They received the original label, which we still use today, the original bond, and the original cave that would have been available to make wine in, but they chose not to produce wine. And then my father spent some time there as a youngster, as his mother's sister. And skip forward 40 years, my great aunt and uncle both passed away, and my dad thought it would be, again, a wonderful place to live, raise a family, and but he did want to produce wine. So we moved there. He bought the property from her estate in the late 70s. And we moved there in 1981 when I was 9 years old, and made wine that first year in the garage. We moved there in early August. I remember it was an early harvest, a warm summer, and started producing wine then. The idea was to produce some wines that my mother and father enjoyed drinking, not really what was appropriate for the region. Napa was already Cabernet country, but my parents enjoyed Burgundy. And so my dad said, well, we're going to make what we like to drink, because if we can't sell it, at least we'll... So we've been directed to speak about sort of family businesses. I can tell you that almost every family vacation as a child was spent touring some kind of winery, often in France, a lucky, wonderful thing to do, but as a child, sometimes you're not really excited to go to another cellar and step over another hose and have another translate for your father again, what this kind of crusty old winemaker is saying about his wine. But looking back on it, it's a wonderful opportunity. So I did as all of us did, and helped out as a child, and enjoyed whenever the times helping bottling, because those are usually the most stressful times. And then got a liberal arts degree in college, but enjoyed wine and went to New York and worked at one of the best wine shops in the world, really, Madison Avenue, Sherry Beeman. I worked there for a year selling wine, and that was a real eye-opener. We're so surrounded with California wines here in California. There are so many wineries, but you sometimes lose touch with the rest of the world, and it was a very international shop, and it actually didn't even sell California wines. So that was a great experience. Today, my husband and I run the winery. We make the wines together. We definitely fight. I think possibly the wines are better for it in a way. There's definitely an attention to to want to make the best wines we can. I think the biggest struggle is my vision coming from working for my father for many years and having so much family history with our brand and being so strong about my conviction with staying true to the house style and, you know, not really changing anything. And then my husband coming at it from his own perspective and being a winemaker in his own right and having worked at other wineries and having to slowly make small changes, but, you know, a lot like Mike was saying, when done, you know, if it's not broken, why would you fix it? And El Molino has been making wonderful wines for a long time, and there really isn't much to change. It's really just to preserve. So I appreciate what Mike said about efficiency and sort of streamlining things. Trying to think of some juicy stories for you guys about fighting in the cellar. The first few years were the roughest. We've also produced 3 children during the last 10 years, and so we've been quite busy. So many a day being very pregnant and leaning over a bin sorting fruit. Yeah, it's just.
So at least it's not all about.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. And so my husband and I make the wine together. We work at the winery. My mother lives at the winery. My children are off and around. My brother helps with the vineyard management. So it's definitely a family operation.
Thank you. Judd, can you give us a little background on you and your family or transitional related?
Yes. Well, this is a little surreal to me, actually, sitting on a panel. People I still think of as like my kids, as peers, because I've known Mike's family for 30-something years. Lily and I were in the same 5th grade class. All of a sudden, we're adults and we're talking to wine people. This is odd. But Alan, I don't know if you're to blame or not, I mean, Alan, because I know it was about the time my father was in school with you that he developed his taste for wine. He come from a small town in Illinois where the only thing you knew about wine is that it was sweet and called Manischewitz, and that's about all they had. But it was time in Los Angeles. Somebody, maybe his brother, maybe you.
Well, if you tasted the beer we used to have at the parties.
Oh, really?
Wine would have been a good alternative.
I see. I don't know if you're to blame or not, Alan, because I know it was about the time my father was in school with you that he developed his taste for wine. He come from a small town in Illinois where the only thing you knew about wine is that it was sweet and called Manischewitz, and that was about all they had. But it was his time in Los Angeles. Somebody, maybe his brother, maybe you.
Well, if you tasted the beer we used to have at the parties.
Oh, really?
Wine would have been a good alternative.
I see. Anyway, he did catch the bug, and armed with his architecture degree from USC, he promptly converted the garage of the house into a little winery. He was a carpenter and architect, so not really growing up, I grew up here, but this was in a canyon in West LA. My early memories before we moved up here was that there was no car in the garage. It was just a crusher and a simmer and big jars of things bubbling and playing mad scientist, which was kind of fun. I mean, he really started off in a garage making wine. It was a hobby that, I don't know if it went right or wrong, but here I am. Eventually led him out and the family out of Los Angeles in the mid-70s. Family came up here and purchased some land south of St. Helena here where they built Whitehall Lane Winery. Being an architect, he was the original architect and winemaker at Whitehall. And it was nice. And much to his credit, this is the kind of guy he was, and kind of the way I feel about life as well. The business was quite successful and grew, I think, bigger than anyone had imagined it ever would. So he wanted out. He wasn't enjoying it. He was much more of a general manager than a winemaker. He was a very hands-on, artistic, creative guy. So that was that. And Whitehall Lane Winery was sold in 1988, and then in 1989, Judd's Hill popped up. My folks had a little house that he designed, a very little house, but very little winery. Kind of the bottom floor was a winery, and the top floor was where they lived. So we or they, that was right about the time I was leaving for college, so I guess they lived, I split town. But it started small again, just to be very hands-on and talk about, succession planning and trying to get the next generation involved. They never put any pressure on me to join the business, except for putting my name on the label. And it didn't work at first. Growing up in it, really, since my first days of being able to stand up and walk, I was stomping on grapes, so I had to see what else the world had to offer. So I left town and got a degree completely unrelated in television production. And they continued on making the wine up there, very mom and pop. And after about 3 years of my working in, is anybody here in film production? Anybody? There's one? All right, earmuffs for a moment. So after about 3 years in film production, I got a whole new appreciation for the wine business. And started working with the family again from down south. Eventually moving back up to do full-time work. In that time, we started something new called Micro Crush, where we would make, and we still do this, make small amounts of wine for really anybody who wants wine made. Started with vineyard owners who wanted a way to showcase their fruit. We make just a barrel of wine exclusively from their fruit, so it's a big part of our customer base. And now there are enthusiasts from all over the country who make wine for and source fruit and make a barrel of wine. So that's become a big part of our business as well. As far as the family dynamic goes, it's really good. Honestly, I can't remember having any crazy fights or arguments with my parents. They seemed very reasonable, and I just assumed growing up drinking wine with my father, maybe it's genetic, maybe it's just environment, I developed maybe a similar palate, so we didn't really have arguments about the direction of winemaking. My wife is the MBA in the family, and she joined the business about 8 years ago and really is taking charge. It's been great. It's this mom and pop business, and it's more streamlined and sophisticated now, but it's still all family owned and operated, which is great. What else can I tell you? We were up on the hill in Con Valley about 7 years ago, moved to a location on Silver Rock Trail. We've driven up and down the south end, you might have seen our sign, and that was certainly new because we'd never had a tasting room at the old Judd's Hill by design. It was my parents' house, and they liked their privacy, and they weren't hermits. You could call up and come visit. That was fine. They just didn't want people dropping in. And that was also due to the fact that back in the White Holly winery days, my father, being a sensitive artist, actually told somebody off. He was working in the tasting room, and I don't want to use such language here, but he really told somebody off who wasn't liking the wine. He got fired from his own tasting room. So both people got what they wanted. The lady got him fired, and he got fired. But now we have a tasting room, and that's certainly a whole new dynamic. So because of that, and because of the fact that we're now making a few more varieties than we did up on the hill, we're seeing more people. There are many more aspects of the business. I found myself actually have transitioned out of day-to-day winemaking, and we have a fellow there. That's not to say I'm not involved. I'm very involved, but day-to-day there's a fellow, Ken Lagoda, who was the winemaker at Raymond for 25 years now. Is our chief of production there, and that's been great too. If you ever come in and meet him, and he fits right in with the family. He's just so down to earth and easygoing. It's a pleasure working at Judd's Hill. Really, everyone is like family. So, in conclusion, I don't really have a closing statement for you, except that I'm very happy to be back in the family business, and well, you did mention my father passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, and luckily we had started this process of what was going to be happening. It wasn't because of his illness; he was just ready to retire. His dream was that he would come into work, write a few winemaking orders, and then go to lunch and go home. That was his dream, and he got a little time to do that because we planned that I would step in, Holly, my wife, would kind of take up the business. My mother is still involved, yeah, she's still involved. She's not traveling, she's taking a little bit of time, but luckily they had the foresight to actually put a little plan into action before that happened, and things are smooth. I hope to see you down there.
Thank you, Jed. Thank you. Chris, let's hear a little bit about you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Does that work?
So, White Rock is another of the ghost wineries from Old Napa. It was first planted back in the 1860s, 1864, I think was the first plant. Apparently in the 1870s they were selling the wine for $1 a gallon, which according to some internet search yesterday is about $18 a gallon these days. So we bought the property in 1977 after my father bought it in 1977. And so my brother and I grew up on the farm. We thought it was a farm. We didn't really have any idea what this whole wine thing was until after we went to college, pretty much. But I think, as Judd said, we got almost no pressure whatsoever to be included in the family business, other than being paid much too little for carrying buckets of grapes around. And it's probably the lack of pressure that got me back in the business after college. So I'm pretty stubborn, and he told me to do it, I never would have done it. It's kind of a fiddler on the roof thing, I think. My parents really set the tone for the business. They were extremely private and didn't want to have an open tasting winery. They just wanted to have their own little kind of paradise in the hills. So the business has stayed pretty much that way. We've had to accept more visitors now that people are buying a lot of wine direct. But it's been a very sort of private enterprise for us as a family. And so Mike and I looked to our parents for, a lot of, for the style of wine and for the style of the business quite a bit. I think one of the great benefits of family business is that you have this history of the last generation working the business that also gives you some help in planning your future for the next generation ahead. I have one son, 3.5, who's not drinking yet. But he does like to run around the winery. He grew up in the winery, as we did. One of the success stories in terms of the family aspect of our business is my father is a very good delegator. He was never a winemaker. He was always a vineyard guy. So he never really did tell me what to do in the winery, luckily. And I don't know if Michael would have to comment on how much he interfered with your operations, but generally he just says do it right and get it done on time and lets you do it, which sounds quite different than last experience. So White Rock is in just kind of on the south side of Stag's Leap, not in Appalachian. On the east side of Napa, so it's the dry side of Napa. It's a volcanic ash, a white volcanic ash property called White Rock because of this white volcanic ash that was actually quarried for some of the stone buildings around there. So the old winery from the 1860s is still there. It's a house now. It's my family's house. And it's built out of white volcanic ash blocks from the property, so that's why it's called White Rock Vineyards. And this volcanic ash vineyard has almost no organic matter. It's extremely poor soil, very dry, and it makes really intense wine. As you tasted with those two calves, in a flight they are always tannic and concentrated. So I started winemaking in Bordeaux and Burgundy for 4 years over there. And I came back thinking about making Burgundy and Bordeaux and realized pretty quickly that Napa Valley is a whole different thing. So it's part of the discussion about transitions, the change of generation, how did I change things taking over winemaking? I took over in 98 or 99. I think my father had dreams of drinking Bordeaux, like, 12.5% alcohol Bordeaux. And that's not something that we can do where we are, especially being a dry site on the hot side. It's, you gotta get a little bit higher alcohol in order to get the flavors that we want. And I think also in replanting after phylloxera, we went to these lower, bigger rootstocks that also ended up making it a little bit higher alcohol, lower crops, higher alcohol. So I do my best to keep the alcohol down. Again, looking to my father's vision to try to make something that has a little more elegance than a lot of the wines that we see. Part of that, keeping the alcohol down requires picking through the vineyard several times in order to get the grapes just when they get ripe, instead of waiting for the last 20% to get ripe before you make the whole thing. Maybe you'll just stop there and then we can get going.
It's up to you. Okay, why don't we go back to Mike and let's taste through wines number 1 and 2. And Mike, you want to just chat a little bit about it, introduce us, and then we'll move on to the next two.
Okay, your first wine's the O2 Well Mountain, and then the 08 is our current release. That's wine number 2. I thought it would be nice to show 4 to 5 years of age, because we can. But it's really a shame to be opening our wines so young, we feel. But 2002, that vintage was my 4th vintage at the winery, and able to make my impact on the wines that I mentioned earlier, cleaning up the cellar, keeping sulfur levels higher, increasing the new wood. Interestingly enough, this is 100% new French oak, and you probably don't feel it's overtly oaky. 2008 is the same, but a different blend of barrels. It's been kind of one of my projects. Like Ivo mentioned, yeast in the vineyard, for me it's been barrels. I've been doing trials for years, and it's really fascinating. You usually ferment the same vineyard lot in all these different barrels, and they're totally different wines. So that's been kind of my project. Listening earlier to Ivo about his digs on the critics' claims. 2002, like I said, is my baby, and Robert Parker just did a 10-year retrospective on this wine, and he called it a shallow, superficial style for this producer. And I went through the blue.
See, when I read something like that, I say, even if you're going to like that wine.
Exactly. So I just wanted to share that with you. Interestingly enough, his successor, I should backtrack. We don't cater to the reviews, obviously, but we haven't had a good review in years. So this guy Galoni shows up and he reviews 05 because Robert hadn't been up. 3 minutes. He does 05, 06, 07. He comes back 6 months later and does the 08. And I'm like, the guy said nothing to me. The monotone, very close. I thought he didn't like me.
Wait, we should just, in case you don't know, Galoni took over for Parker. I don't know if you know Parker's.
Just real quiet guy on his laptop. And I was done with reviews for him. And he ended up really liking this 08. So, of course, that caused a fury and everyone had it. 08, we had a 60% crop loss due to frost. We had 19-degree weather for 4 days in April, 35 feet up. We had walnut trees freezing. We bought about 20% more fruit from the Napa floor to help, but we were still really low on wine. So we get a great review on that, and then we run out of wine. Wonderful problem. But it's just really amazing to all of us here, I'm sure, how much critics drive sales. And there's no secret that if you don't get a good review from one person, you might get a better review from somebody else. this same '08 got 7 points less from the Spectator. You know, you can taste them on different days, and you can taste them on wines with different labels that are the same wine. I mean, they're human. They have a lot of experience, but they just have their own opinions. So, I don't know, it's really, it's frustrating. Selling the wine is the hard part. Making the wine, working in the vineyard and winery, that's the fun part for most of us, I would speak. Selling wine is just, and when you have good reviews, great. Post them on your website. When you have bad reviews, post them on your website. It's hilarious, but I won't say more.
Thanks, Mike. Lily,
Yes,
introduce us to the wines of El Molino.
okay.
And I think the order on the sheet is
Yeah.
on these two wines and also on Jud's Hill is reversed, so.
Right, so you'll go with glass number 4. We'll taste the Chardonnay first.
I'm sorry, what were those numbers?
Glass number 4, the Chardonnay. So it's the, on your
white.
far left. It's the glass number 4. This is our, we're pouring, these are both our current releases. So this is our current release. We released it around May 1st. It's the 2010 Chardonnay. This is the 23rd year that we've released our Chardonnay from our vineyard in Rutherford. Very old vines. They were planted in 1978. They were dry farmed for the first 30 years. Around their 30th year, we can put some irrigation on them just to help on as they get older. We have a really hot spell. It's nice to give them a little drink of water. It's Wente clone. It's a California farming family. Chardonnay in California, you know, they're sort of styles. I mean, it changes, right? So we have all the bells and whistles and all the oak and the butter and really rich style. Maybe doesn't age so well. And I think that style was popular in the late 80s and into the 90s. But my mom and dad enjoyed drinking wines that were more balanced. So we've always tried to make a Chardonnay that was very balanced, but from a vineyard in Napa Valley, where it's obviously a beautiful climate. You can get nice tropical flavors. So we don't do malolactic fermentation. That's one thing in our style that allows us to have some more, keep the natural acidity nice and high, and have the wine nice and balanced, and provide structure. You know, the acidity provides some nice structure. Our Chardonnay has a lot of length on the palate. It's pretty viscous. It goes really well with food because of that. You know, it really is a nice food wine. And I think somebody said earlier, you know, you want to have more than one glass of wine. And certainly with this wine, you can drink it with more than one glass. And it's not something that's so overpowering that you just want one glass. We've always, you know, talking about scores. I agree with Mike very much. It's very frustrating, being a small winery. We've been lucky with our scores, and we've sort of always scored in the low 90s, sort of across the board, which is great. But I'm sure it's a lot, maybe the way, you know, famous actor might feel. You know, don't read your own press because it can be very frustrating. You just have to keep your head down and make the best wine you can, and hope that your customers, if they are your customers, it's probably because they like the wines. And they listen to their own palate. And so this is the Chardonnay, and then we can move on to the Pinot Noir, which is class number 3. This is also the current release. This is the 2009. We grow the Pinot Noir in Rutherford. We always wanted to do an estate line and have, you know, full control of the grapes and the winemaking. It's a complex wine. We wanted something with structure. My father did not I'll use some layman terms. He didn't want to make a wimpy wine. He didn't want a strawberry light Pinot Noir. He wanted something with some depth, and he wanted something that you really noticed in the glass. I think one of the greatest compliments that we ever got on our Pinot Noir, that I know he loved this, and I don't remember who. I think it was a Wine and Spirits magazine said that our Pinot Noir was like Geoffroy Chambertin on steroids. And, he loved that because, that's what he wanted. But, the wines have always had an elegance to them. They are powerful, but they're not, totally over the top. So that's the style we're still pursuing today. We use very traditional winemaking, lots of pitchforking, as Mike alluded to. Very low tech. I think it's always interesting. People are into this whole green thing and how can we be more, eco-conscious and all this stuff. And I think if you're making wine with great intention and the way they did in the olden days, you become green without even meaning to. So with the Pinot Noir, we don't use any electricity for the first 2 weeks of winemaking. So we pick the grapes, we place them in a fermentation tank. We don't use any commercial yeast, it's all wild yeast. We punch the cap down with our feet. We don't have any temperature control on the tanks. There's no jacketing, there's no glycol. It's just au natural. And then we bleed most of the free run juice straight down to barrel. And then we'll press a little bit, and that's when the electricity comes in to run the modern press. So it's very old school. It is very labor intensive, but hopefully it makes the wine turn out better.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice comment. Say it louder.
It shows.
Good. Okay, Judd, and also here, the wines are, you'll see, are reversed from your list. Judd?
Yes. By the way, the little luxuries in life, having a clean number, amazing. When we were up on the hill in Tron Valley, very steep hillside, no way to have a run forklift without just creating disaster and tragedy. So we had this crazy Rube Goldberg design where a trailer would pull up in a thing would hoist it and it would slide here and then it would pump up against something and then you could dip it and up hoist it. It was just ridiculous. Where we are now, first thing we did, forklift would have been phenomenal. The nightmares have ceased. Sleep at night when harvest comes. So what are you drinking? What did I bring? Oh yeah. A couple wines. We make several different varieties. Cabernet is probably our flagship wine. We also do a Pinot Noir. But I saw the company we were in and I thought it would be fun to have something different. So the Sauvignon Blanc, this is something we began producing when we made the move to our current location on Silverado Trail for a couple of reasons. First and foremost was a business decision because we have a tasting room. Not everybody that's going to be coming in is going to want the Cabernet that we know for producing, and you've got to have something for folks that just pop in. So what would that be? We needed something white. Well, I always loved Sauvignon Blanc, so that's where I got to put my 2 cents in. We needed something white, besides Sauvignon Blanc would be it. So here it is, our 2011 Sauvignon Blanc. It's a blend of 2 different vineyard sources. There's a vineyard in Calistoga that we source from, and one in Rutherford. I just really like the flavors of the fruit. It's not, well, here's my thing across the board with wine, and the way I approach it is, I really want the fruit to show through. I feel we're in Napa Valley where we grow, I was about to say some of the best, but I'll just go out on a limb and say the best, wine grapes in the world. So let's let them be the star of the show. Thank you to, the Nords of the world for growing great grapes. So we don't really do much, I just picked the Sauvignon Blanc based on the flavors, and you might not have guessed by looking at me, but I kind of like tropically pineapple kind of flavors, and I find that comes through in these vineyards. both these vineyards we picked, the Sea Bassett is just incredible. And when this comes out of the press, it's just, you know, one of these pucker faces. So I know the great flavors are underneath, so what we do is we divide. We keep about half of it in stainless steel so it stays nice and puckery. And then about half of it goes into neutral oak barrels. So that's if the barrels are a little older. The barrel's like a tea bag. The more you use it, the less flavor you get out of it. So on purpose, use barrels I know are not going to give it any woody flavor, but are going to help soften the wine. Then, after some time, whatever that might be, after tasting, we put them back together and hopefully achieve a nice balance, and we have a 100% Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc. What else?
We're running a little bit late, Josh, so you want to hop on to the...
Yeah, Merlot. It's Napa Merlot, and I hope you enjoy it. Try it with the duck, it's delicious.
Perfect, huh? Well, you can say a little bit about it.
What needs to be said?
Okay, you just said a little bit about it, you're right.
Let's try this nice white rock.
All right, so I was going to start by saying I think that people on the panel would agree that one of the distinctions of being a family business is that we feel this very strong responsibility to the work that was done before us. And in the case of a winery like White Rock, we have a responsibility to the soil, to the terroir, to not only farm sustainably, but also make a product that really expresses the uniqueness of that property. We're not in a small family business to make a commodity Cabernet. We're trying to make something that expresses something unique about the family and unique about the property. So the White Rock being a very unique soil bearer, this white volcanic ash is extremely mineral, gives a lot of minerality to the wines, a lot of intensity. My approach from the winemaking is to use a very modest amount of oak and just basically craft the wine as much as possible so that there's no inputs. So the farming is, we farm the vineyard so that the grapes are picked at the appropriate balance, so there's no need to add anything to change the balance of the wine. And then in the case of the Chardonnay, 2009, the current release, picked that at 23 grapes. So it's 14% alcohol. That's as low as I can go. And then fermented in neutral barrels with natural yeast. Usually takes 6 months to ferment. And I think I'm not really interested in the fruitiness of the wine. I'm more interested in the underlying terroir aspects, such as the stony aromas and flavors and minerality that the vineyard really wants to make. So I do a very small amount of malolactic, just enough to kind of give a hint of buttery creaminess, but not to overwhelm the flavor of the vineyard. So that's the Chardonnay, 2009.
Thank you very much. And a great pairing with the wines we had on the first slide, White Rock. Yes, sir.
So, to the last speaker, would you say using white Burgundy analogy or more of a Chablis
I suppose so. Sure.
Yes.
With Mike, I know that you and
Could you
your brother
speak a little bit louder, please?
I know that you and your brother both work in the same winery. You work with each other making your wine, or you focus on the white wine, your brother work on the red wine?
No, actually, my brother just does the vineyard management, and I do all the winemaking. So I made the reds that you guys tasted earlier, and I made the white. But we do work together quite a bit, since we're farming the grapes to make the style of wine that we want to make to show off the terroir of the property. So we're really working together quite a bit. Usually in the wine business, there's kind of a battle between the vineyard and the winery, where the vineyard wants to grow a lot of tons and get a high price for it, and the winery wants to have less tons and they're all producers. I'm simplifying things. There's a lot of people that don't do that, like the North, for example. But the nice thing about working with Michael is that we can really farm the vineyard. This Chardonnay is mostly 32-year-old vines, and it's farmed about 2 tons an acre. So that's something that we can do if we work together, but if he was his own company, he would never do that. Great.
Thank you. You wanted to pose the same question about, and if we could just go briefly, one after another, because we're running a little late on time. The question was the change in style over the last several decades, and how it equates to not only the consumer, but how you, in taking over, in the generational change, how you are either pursuing that change in style or staying with the traditional. So we just have a couple of quick questions.
Specifically on aging ones.
I know, and yes, and the ageability of the new style.
No secret that balanced acidity is really important for ageable wine. And in Dunn's case, I alluded to it earlier, we've increased the new wood I do barrel trials to find barrels that are a little more rounded in mouthfeel to get that astringent tannin. And then
Can we listen to Mike, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
And then Brettanomyces always rears its ugly head in old cellars, and so that really was a big focus. To clean that sulfur levels more higher, being more cautious and sterilizing things. But that being said, we still extract the hell out of our wines, and we have them in 30 months per barrel. We make sure the acid levels a bit more prominent in a lot of capture nowadays, and there's no reason these shouldn't vary because of changes to the initial release that you might get. So typically range wines you needed to wait for 10 years. And now people are like, wow, 2 years I can actually take it. You see, like in 2002, that's 10 years now.
Thanks, Mike.
I think we haven't made a change in style. We've been really lucky. I think there's a huge responsibility when you come into a business that's already up and running and a winemaking style that's already in place. It's not really a blank canvas. I mean, you're stepping off of one stone onto another. And my dad had a strong vision and a great vision, and the wines were already fantastic. We feel very grateful to be able to continue. We've made very minor tweaks to the style, and it's really just trying to get the most out of each growing season, each vintage, to get the most purity and the most expression from that vintage. But we've always made wines to age, always, and our Chardonnays and Pinots have been known for that. And that's part of not doing a malolactic fermentation at all, keeping the acidity, as Mike said. So style-wise, really haven't made any changes. Just trying to keep it up.
Thank you, Lily. Judd?
I know we're short on time, so Lily, I think, said it very well, and that applies to our wine as well. She said, from one stone to the next, continuing the same type of style, maybe different technical aspects, but really keeping that, showcasing the varietal characteristics of the fruit as the main characteristic of the wine is what we have been doing, and it's what we continue doing, and we're just glad we have folks that appreciate that.
Christopher?
So the winemaking for White Rock hasn't changed at all in the last 25 years. It's pretty much exactly the same. The red winemaking has picked a little bit riper because personally I like the flavors of the wine a little bit riper than what we were digging in the 80s. But the style of the wine is still driven by the vineyard, but the style of the wine is definitely always an ageable style. We age all of our wines in the cave for white at least a year and then red for 3 to 5 years before release. So our wine cave has a bunch of alcoves dug into it where we put 4,000 bottles at a time, and there's 16 of them in the winery. So we keep 3 vintages of reds stacked up for additional aging. So the 07s that we had are our current lease right now. But, I mean, a lot of the, well, I'm just gonna stop there.
Okay, well, thank you again to the panel. I think what you guys did is answered all the questions nobody thought to ask, so thank you very much. And could I just ask that I know it's getting a little late. There's a lot of information that we've digested so far. Two great panels on the vineyard and the winery. And now we're looking at the operations of the winery and how that's transcended different generations. All the way, I'm going to make my introduction real brief and then make it more solid. Andy Hoxie is at the end of the table, and Andy is actually the fourth generation of the Grisi family. They went way, way back in the Napa Valley. I met Andy first, I guess, about 12 or 14 years ago. And really a terrific company, terrific family, and meaningful transitions from one generation to the other. Next to Andy is his daughter, Kendall, who is obviously the fifth generation. And Kendall works in the compliance division of the Napa Wine Company, which she monitors all of the wine movement, taxes, etc. The wine compliance is a very difficult, very complicated and layered subject, and Kendall is doing a great job with that. She graduated from Santa Catalina High School in Monterey, went on to Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, and now is finishing her MBA in wine business management from Sonoma State College. And then we have Kara Pacoda Dunn. You met her husband Mike Dunn in the last panel, and you'll know from the name Pacoda, she's the daughter of Robert Pacoda, a legendary figure in the Napa Valley. And they have two kids, which complicates the business life, but Kara takes care, in retro, Southern, she takes care of the business and marketing end. And then we have Josh Phelps, another familiar name. I'm sorry, Josh Phelps, another familiar name in the Napa Valley wine community. Josh's dad, Chris, has been the winemaker. He was a founding winemaker at Dominus, and is a longtime winemaker at Swanson. And Chris has teamed up with his friend and former football player, Carlo Trinchero, another very familiar name in the Napa Valley wine community. So Carlo and Josh, they do everything themselves in their winery. They're going to explain more about it, but they do everything from labeling to packaging to vineyard to winemaking to sourcing, and they make great beer. So why don't we start off with Kendall, and let's talk about compliance in the family.
A topic we're also eager to hear about, I'm sure. Well, so this will be our 109th harvest for the family, so we're very excited about that. I'm sure when my great-great-grandfather began, he couldn't even imagine what 2012 would be like. But from Giuseppe to Andy Calissa, it just grew and grew, and we were always great growers. And then when my father came back from flying planes for the Air Force, great-grandfather Andrew Calissa said, I'd really like you to help me out with this. And so it's just continued from that point on. When I came back from college, it was 2008, so things were on the downside, and I was kind of wondering, well, what should I be doing now? And we had a space in compliance, and my dad said, this is a great place for you to really start your career, and even if you wanted to go on to something else, but compliance is something you can use in all aspects of business. And so I started doing this, and it's very different for a custom crush facility because it's not just your own wines, it's somebody else's. So if you get the taxes wrong, you will have a very upset person calling you on the phone. So I started doing that, and then I decided to take some business courses at Napa College, and because my degree from college had been history and film studies. Which it lends itself to learning about the history of your family, but not exactly to running a business. So that progressed then to applying for Sonoma State's wine MBA, which is still a very new degree, but there's been a lot of fun people there. Not too many from Napa, so I'm hoping that they'll expand that with the new EMBA that's changing things. But it's been really fun. I graduate in December, so I have had enough of schooling after 25 years almost. So it's time. So with compliance, it's very good. It's a good place to start out if your expertise is not analogy. But it's always fun because my grandmother will stop in, my great aunt, my uncle, my dad will walk through. So I always have to make sure that my computer is on the right kind of stuff. So it's such a special tradition to be a part of. My younger sister is looking more into sales and marketing, whereas I prefer the business side of things. But we have always just been around. My dad would take us when we were 5 and 3 years old, and we would even throw the yellow bins out from the tractor to the guys. I've known a lot of our legal workers all that time. Their children are my sister and my ages. I worked at Bottom Line one summer for college, so that really expanded my Spanish knowledge. And while I was in college, watching bottles go by every single minute, making sure the cork's in there and things like that. And so it's such a special thing, and I've been so proud to be a part of it. And seeing my dad in another light, just as my father did as a CEO and managing partner of the winery, you really gain a lot of knowledge out of it.
Thank you very much, Kendall. Kara?
Okay, so as Ellen mentioned, my father was Robert Krikota, is Robert Krikota. He started off in the coffee and tea business, worked for Nestle in San Francisco. In 1969, they purchased Nestle, purchased Beringer Winery, and that's how my dad went from coffee to wine. He worked for Beringer Winery for almost 10 years, and actually a funny little side story is that he, in his work for Beringer, was the land agent, so he got to buy and sell all these great properties in the valley, and actually sold Mike Gergich's property to start the winery. His favorite stories. And so then my father started his own winery in 1978. I worked for him starting in 1990. I worked with him for 15 years. Kind of worked my way up, you know, as a kid to growing up in a business. Just our family home was right there in the winery. So one of my favorite childhood pictures actually is me in a Girl Scout uniform driving the Caterpillar tractor. So I worked with him, came back to school, you know, was working down in the Bay Area. He called me shortly after I graduated actually and said, I have an opening. So at the time, I met my husband, Mike, and we were engaged, so that was even more of a reason to come back to Napa and start working for my dad. And then Mike and I started our Retro Cellars brand in 2003. My father sold his winery in 2005 to KJ. It's now the Adelon facility in Calistoga. And I think that's about it. Our son, we're taking our firstborn to college tomorrow, so it's exciting. He actually designed our label for Retro Cellars.
Thank you very much, Kara. Carlo, do you want to give a little background?
My family came here from Italy. My grandfather in 1948. He bought a little winery called Sutter Home from the Sutters. At that time, it was just a real mom and pop operation. I mean, my uncle was winemaker, my grandma did compliance, so did my aunt, my dad. I don't really know what he did, but he was around the winery. And then my uncle came across White Zinfandel, kind of turned from a mom and pop operation to a big business. And as I grew up, I didn't really know what was going on in the winery. I was a little kid, doing the mailroom stuff, closing stuff down. I didn't know the whole aspect of the business. And when we started our business, we started having to figure out the bottles, the labeling. I'm looking at that business, and I'm like, I don't know how they operate from day to day with all those cases. So I got into sales with Young's Market out in Sacramento, and then from there I went down to San Diego, where I'm at right now, where I do all the key accounts for Tranquero, and I want to take you. And we'll tell you something about it. So.
Yeah. So Carl and I met in kindergarten, St. Helena Catholic School. So obviously both grew up here now. My dad was a founding winemaker at Dominus after a short stint at Petrus in France when he graduated from college. Went on to make Camus for a long time. Now he makes Swanson and consults and has his own. My parents have their own small winery. So I mean that's kind of my background. I grew up similar to Carlo, running around the winery, just learning the business at a young age. Didn't really necessarily have a huge interest in wine at a young age. I think it was mid-college years. I was up at Chico State, Carlo was at SAP. We started kind of, I don't know, I guess taking an interest in wine and chatting about the possibility of starting a little venture. And my senior year, Carlo's junior year, we started getting serious about it. When I graduated from college, and Carlo was a senior playing football at SAC, we launched Taken, which was just 100 cases of Cabernet the first year. And the idea behind Taken Wine Company was, leveraging our connections growing up in St. Helena, targeting boutique producers that we could source, the best premium food that we could get. As far as we make a $30 Cabernet, so we were in a tight spot, but. That's how it started, so 100 cases, and we're at about 1,500 cases today. Like Alan said, it's still a really small, we do everything. So we design the packages to the wine, we do all the marketing. That first year we just loaded up Carlos Tahoe and put 50 cases of wine in the back and drive to Los Angeles and hope to sell it along the way. Sometimes we didn't. It was a learning experience.
How'd you come up with the name Taken?
Well, during college, we decided we're like, all right, we're going to come up with wine. We had, of course, a list of all these cool, crazy names, and we figured out there's some other wines out there that have names, so we had to do compliance and whatnot. And he called me one day and he goes, all our names, they're Taken. Why don't you just call it Taken? And I was like, all right. Paper, and at the time our buddy was studying graphic design in college, and we called him like, hey, can you put this on the computer, make it look cool, And after that, just ran with it. So.
And now we've got other wines are called available and complicated, so we've taken the concept of our business, the reason our price points are such and the names are such is because we're 25 and 26 years old. We want our wines to be, solid, quality wine because we're into wine, our families are in the wine business. We also wanted to have fun, approachable packaging and concept that people our age would appreciate, and it could be like an entry-level wine, to get into wine. So using those names, kind of like Facebook, our generation, statuses, it's been fun.
I think what you're saying is you put a lot of research into packaging, making wine, sourcing food, being in the family, and not a lot into naming. Okay.
That's okay.
So to move on, Andy, would you please introduce your wines and talk a bit about them?
Sure. The theme of this whole thing is multi-generations, and I think that, Napa Valley has really been blessed with waves of subsequent generations. We're talking about succession and a variety of issues. But, back to the 1800s, we had a vibrant business, and it goes up and it comes down, and it's all over the board. But this valley seems to move forward with each successive generations, and we have many, many people to thank for that. But one of the issues that we think is so important is remember our heritage. We in the Palissa family are so thankful for some of the assets that we have that we're stewards of at this point in time. The first grapevine was planted in Napa Valley in 1838 by George Yount. Basically, the Camus land grant went from Yountville Crossroads up to, of course, Rutherford Crossroads, 11,000 acres. We still farm about 1,000 acres of that original land grant, and this first wine, this Chardonnay, comes from the Blockhouse Vineyard, which is where his blockhouse, George Yount's blockhouse, was. It's been farmed organically since the mid-'80s. while we think we're really, really good at Sauvignon Blanc, we decided to show you a Chardonnay. We're looking for kind of a crisp pippin apple style versus much oak treatment, that sort of thing. It is surly in tank, and so our 2011 Elizabeth Rose Chardonnay. The second wine is our Oakville Winery 2009 Cabernet Sauvignon. And the reason that we chose this to show you today, if any of you, pardon me, remember, we purchased from Hugh Blind, the Napa Wine Company, 20 years ago next year. The whole vineyard, there was about 60 acres of vineyard behind the winery, and it was called BV7. The vineyard was dead due to phylloxera. But this particular vineyard went to George D. Latour Private Reserve each and every year. Stunning vineyard for him, but it was dead. I could not find anybody in that organization that would tell me what the clone was. And
Here's the light.
where would you like me to start? I think I'm well over my 3 minutes, but the reason that I chose this particular Cabernet is this vineyard was a stellar vineyard, went into George D. Latour Private Reserve called BV7. I could not, I knew I needed to pull and replant this vineyard in the early 90s, but didn't have a clue. So I individually pulled about 20,000 vines by hand, left 100 vines that were still healthy, and then when the rootstock came up the vine, we used those 100 mother plants to maintain this particular clone. From my perspective, it's not typical of most other Cabernets in Oakville. From my perspective, Oakville Cabernets are more black cherry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a little dustier, a little softer than most, and so it's a clone we like, but we work really, really hard paying attention to that area.
This is wine 5, correct?
One. I'm sorry.
1 and 2 were reversed on the floor by the color. So, thank you, Henry. Kara?
Mike.
This is our 08 Howell Mountain Retro Cellars Petite Syrah, class number 3. It's actually a pre-release. We're going to release it next month officially. We only made 100 cases of this wine. As Mike mentioned in the 08 harvest, we had some really frosty temperatures in April that really come back from production. This comes from a very historic vineyard at Howell Mountain called the Park Muscatine Vineyard. Ridge actually used to have a Park Muscatine label. It used to be a Zinfandel Petite Syrah blend in the vineyard. My father-in-law Randy bought the vineyard in 92 and was selling the grapes to Jerry Steps at Royal for many years. My funny story kept asking him year after year, I'd like to buy some of that fruit from you. I want to make some wine. So finally, 03 was our first vintage for Retro Cellars, making wine from this historic Park Muscatine vineyard. And we are, again, just a very small mom and pop operation. Usually our production is between 300 and 400 cases. We also make a Napa Valley Petite Syrah as a byproduct. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much. Josh?
Yeah. I'll follow that up as next as well. I'm going to talk about Complicated, which is Carl. It's our newest brand, Carl and I are doing. We just started it this year. That's going to be glass number 5. And this is Grenache, about 60% Grenache, 30% Syrah, 10% Carignan. That's all from Santa Barbara County. Kind of inspired by our love for Priorat wines and some southern French wines. And it's fun. It's, you know, the style of remember wines is kind of, you know, right now.
Sorry, glass number 5?
Glass number 5. Oh, sorry, yeah, 5, yeah.
That's confusing.
Yeah, the board's got to reverse on a couple of these.
Could you please tell us,
This is
Alan,
glass number 5.
what are all the glasses?
Yeah, glass number 1 would be the Elizabeth Road Chardonnay. Sorry, the Oakville Cabernet. Glass number 2 is the Chardonnay. Glass number 3 is the Retro Syrah. Glass number 4 would then be the Taken Cabernet. And glass number 5 would be the complicated Grenache Blanc.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think some people, like myself, were confused.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Now we'll go on to Taken Cabernet. Glass. This is 100% Napa Valley Cabernet from Oakville. This is our flagship. We started with this back in 2009. We had the oyster. Sorry for that. This was our first variety we played with 100 cases, like Josh said. It's a very easy drinking cab. Once again, approachability. You still get some bright food on it. Good mouthfeel, some good tannins. The reason, like the whole approachability thing, is the fastest growing age group that's hitting the wine is 25 to 35. And we want, like we said before, our age group to be like, hey, wine's kind of good. It's not just for people, you know, get into this, buy the bottle, buy the bottles, and really get into the wine, and then move on from this wine to maybe more structured Napa Cab, and get all the other products. That's why we went to the Grenache blend as well, is because we feel like the Grenache blend, Grenache is kind of like the next step. More and more people are starting to order, more and more people are starting to get into easy drinking the fun wine. So. The alcohol is 14.5.
And that has all Oakville, St. Louis, and Young.
Yes, please.
Could you repeat the blend in the
Complicated.
Grenache?
Yeah, 60% Grenache, 30% Syrah, 10% Carignan. It's all Santa Barbara County.
So that's a rundown of the wines we all had some time to taste, and now I'd like to open it up for some great questions and comments.
I had a question for Kendall. I just wondered what range of compliance issues you deal with, and what are some of the regulatory agencies, I would guess?
My job primarily deals with, my job is for production compliance. So the time that it's brought in as grapes, and then to the time that it's actual wine when it's bottled. So I don't handle any out-of-state shipping and goodness. So but I do deal with TTB and colas, so everything is labeled through our winery. And then doing the grape crush report, and so POE. So I deal at a lot of different levels, but I also track every single lot of wine that comes through our facility.
Thank you, Kendall. More questions? Yes.
The question for Carlo and Josh.
Could you say it a little louder, please?
The question for Carlo and Josh, just based on the fact that you are marketing to the millennials in your age group, are you finding that your mailing list actually reflects that based on your labels and your approach? Because your Cabernet, just as you said, it's drinkable now. Are you finding that people are actually, is that resonating with your core group?
Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of social media stuff, targeting our generation, which works really well. We actually conduct a lot of sales via social media, Facebook in particular. But our mailing list for sure, we've seen a lot of people like 28, 35. Yeah, I'd say, but not to say that we don't have people from all ages. What's nice about our price points is people that are into wine, they're looking for a good Napa Cab as an every night drinker can go to Taken, and then people that are getting into wine can look at it as a more premium product. So you can hit both markets. So that's it. $30 retail. $30 retail on the Napa 24.
How many different varietals or blends do you make under the Taken label?
We have the Taken, which is 100% apple cab, Grenache blends, Grenache, Syrah, and then we have the white wine called Available, which is really cool, fun white blend. It's a Sauvignon Blanc and a Malbec blend. We wanted to step outside of the box. Everyone does the Sauvignon Blanc, very traditional blend, but we kind of wanted to step outside and create a little unique trend. It's got a touch of sweetness, but we get the Sauvignon from the North Coast, so it's got high acid, so it balances really well with the sugars in the Luscan. It kind of creates kind of like a, it florals on the nose, then it kind of bites off, a little sharp like a Sauvignon. It's real great summer wine.
Thank you. I'm looking for hands. Yes. But you have to talk loud.
All right. So, this
You have
is
to
for,
fight like
this is
that.
for Josh and for Carlo. On your Rhone varietals, what do you attest the difference between the Rhone varietals from France and the end product? And the way we make wine here in the Napa Valley with the same grape variety.
I think, well, dealing with the Central Coast in particular, the climate, I mean, Paso more so than Santa Barbara, but even Santa Barbara inland, where we're sourcing, I mean, you're dealing with like hot temperatures and you're gonna get really ripe fruit, which is gonna equal a riper, a little bit, higher alcohol style wine that you're gonna get from the Rhone. But you see the kind of climate and style in Priorat in certain parts in the south of France, like Morée, in areas where there is a hot climate and it's dry. So we see some similarities between Santa Barbara County and places in France and Spain. But I think, Rhone, you're generally going to be on lower alcohols. That's a climate thing.
I guess when you're saying Santa Barbara County and being warm, you're talking about on the east side of the coast.
Correct. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Because most people equate Santa Barbara to equal weather, more sharply. I have a question to ask Andy. Andy, your family has gone through probably as many, if not more, generations of vineyard ownership, winemaking than virtually any of the family in the valley. How do you see the ability of the new generations carrying forward the concepts or morphing the concepts of the older generations to fit today's market?
Well, again, I think that as long as we understand, family members understand our heritage and where we came from, along the same vein of you need to be in business this time next year. So as long as you honor the heritage, and there's a lot of constraining, as we know, in Napa we've had other viable businesses. Today, it's a desert of grapevines, not a bad thing, but the highest and best use is grapevines. You don't know that, when I came back to the farm, I think we were 60% whites, including Gewürztraminer, Sylvaner, Franken, Riesling, those sorts of things. And nowadays, you barely grow whites. So times change. Maybe it's not another crop. Maybe it's a different variety that none of us have heard about. But we do have to pay the bills. And so as long as we pay attention to our heritage, where we come from with an eye into the future, that we do need to pay the bills, I think we'll continue in this vein.
Thank you. Yes.
Another question for Andy. I think we may have had dinner at Camus many years ago in the 90s. So what percentage of your grapes do you sell to other wineries? Because you grow many thousands of acres, or 1,000.
Yeah.
And then do you still actually sell to Camus?
We don't sell any grapes to Camus at this point in time. We sell grapes to 21 different wineries. We still sell 85% of our fruit to other people.
The other 15% goes into these?
Goes into our own labels. From my perspective, our heritage is in the field. And if we were to turn all of our grapes into wine, from my perspective, the tail begins to wag the dog. You'll never see me in the vineyard. My goals for the vineyard, and again, you need to pay attention to your business as a whole. But when I took over the farm, the useful life of a vineyard was like 25 years, and some of it is probably because you're changing from works commuter to something that you can actually sell. But some of it is dead arm and AXR or phylloxera type B and things like that. So my goal is into the future is that the useful life of a vineyard is 35 years, not 25 years. So my attitude, I'm still in the vineyard. Yes, I do. We have products in the marketplace, but it's certainly not a focus.
Thank you.
Yes.
A little offbeat question, but I wondered, and maybe Andy would be in a better position to answer this. The rest of you so young, but what about the emerging markets of China and India? Has that been felt anywhere?
Yeah, while we're in Japan, Korea, Germany, it's an ego thing from my perspective. I mean, if you look at the rest of the world, the target is painted on our back. The rest of the world wants to sell wine to the United States, not vice versa. I could be an ostrich with his head in the sand, but I'm not too keen on what's going on.
That's refreshing. Anybody else? Yes, please, Diana.
May I hear some more about the BV7? I would like to better understand what you found as how it tastes differently from other cabs, and for how long have you made this particular model?
Well, the George de la Tour, and I haven't consumed a lot of it, Private Reserve, has always been known to be a softer Cabernet than a lot of them in the marketplace. Again, it doesn't really marry with our this particular clone with our other Cabernets because we think it's softer. And I don't want to use the Merlot word, but I think there's a dustiness, there's a softer side, and it was something that we felt it was worth preserving. This clone, I don't even know what to call it at this point in time. Obviously, we don't have the right to use the word BV7. You will never see that in print. It's just something that we feel selected from a particular vineyard that has a history in Napa Valley.
And how long have you been making it?
Oh, this is probably our, we pulled it, replanted in '94. It's probably our third or fourth vintage in the bottle.
And what's the case production?
800 cases.
Andy, you described the dustiness, and I get a very Rutherford kind of a character, whereas that I don't normally associate with Oakville.
Yeah, and that's a question in my mind. It's not something you would equate to Oakville. Is it a soil thing or is it a clone thing? Who knows? I mean, I haven't gone the next step.
But it is reminiscent of a lot of the old BV private reserves. Yes.
When you say you don't have the right to use it, it would obviously be an accurate description to say what it is, but what is the legality
I can't imagine that BV would have a problem with me talking to a group like this and saying, this was a clone that used to go into their great Cabernets.
I'm just wondering what's the legality that prevents you from being more formalized about that?
I wouldn't want to put it on the label.
Okay, you don't
I
want
can
to
vocalize it in
get
a group
yourself out
like this,
there.
and
Yeah.
you could probably go home around and say, oh, guess what? But I just wouldn't want it on a brochure or a label.
Okay.
He doesn't want to find out what the legality is.
You couldn't find out the legality on
Okay, good analysis, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, did you have a hand up, Pat? No.
Carol, what's the age of the vines at the park on Spitty?
1952. Yeah, they were planted in 1952. And actually our neighbors at Outpost took some bud cuttings from the vineyard to plant theirs, and they had a DNA testing done at Davis. And it turns out that some of the vines are actually color sand, and the others are really plum.
Say again, we didn't hear what the vines were.
Color sand, and which was the original parent that crossed with Syrah to make Petit Syrah. Kind of interesting. And then the Jarry plum.
Have the Park Muscatine vines been sort of, you ripped out the non-Petit Syrah and replanted Petit Syrah, or is it still a vineyard blend?
It's still, well, when Randy bought the vineyard, he tore out the Zinfandel part of the vineyard and replanted in Cabernet. And kept it wasn't a traditional field blend in that the vines were mixed. There was the Petit Syrah.
The Cabernet section and the Petit Syrah section.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Anybody have another question? Then I have one. Kara, your dad really made a name for himself, as we've discussed, with Sauvignon Blanc. Do you have any desire to get into the Sauvignon Blanc business? It's one of the hot varieties. Not saying anything against Andy.
You know, I personally love and really enjoy Sauvignon Blanc, but kind of it's been there, done that, and I think Mike and I are talking more about Grenache these days, and you know, getting our hands on some good old Grenache grapes. But
getting into Carlo and Josh's domain. Thank you. Okay, last one.
One variety from each person as to what they think is the upcoming thing besides Grenache.
Big hand.
You enjoyed this? I thought all our panelists were excellent, and I thank them very, very much for their time and their wine. And we made you bring too much wine, so there is wine left over here. You may take your wines with you, take them to the luncheon and serve them, take them home, or donate them to the wine library. Thank you very much for attending. We'll get you back.